Good morning, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of Room 52 on lirmedia.tv. And our email is info@lirmedia.tv, and all our shows are up on our YouTube channel, and you can get those via our website. I'm absolutely delighted and thrilled to have one of our foremost, I don't know how to describe her, singer, teacher, broadcaster. Oh gosh, I think that's enough. Melanie O'Reilly, welcome to our little program this morning.
Thanks so much, Pat, and fabulous to be here.
It is strange times we're living in, of course, but the weather helps, I think, is helping us a lot to overcome those, I suppose, social distancing and all those rules that they have in place. Anyway, you yourself grew up in Dublin, and your early influences, of course, you came from a family of artists. Tell us what was your household like growing up?
I was very lucky. I had a family who just surrounded me with music, and we were always listening to music, whether it was on the radio, but also a great collection of albums and LPs as they were then, and when I was younger. And we had lots of varied music. So we listened to a lot of jazz. My parents were jazz lovers and were brought up with jazz, particularly the big bands when they were courting. So I was lucky to be able to listen to jazz all my early life. And my sister, my older sister, was working in a record shop in Dublin, and she used to bring home lots of jazz. So she was a big influence on me in bringing home, firstly, great albums, particularly Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday, but also Duke Ellington and Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. So it was across the board, the great names. So then the other aspect of my family is that their performance, because theatre is a big part of my family. So music and theatre, due to the fact that for example, my uncle, who was my godfather, founded the Dublin Theatre Festival, the International Dublin Theatre.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. And who was he?
So his name was Brendan Smith. He's passed away, sadly, but he was a huge influence on many people I know, actually, who've went through his academy as well. So
the Brendan Smith Academy, now that you mentioned his name, yeah.
Yeah, and so he founded the Dublin Theatre Festival. So my mum's sister, who he married, she was an actress as well. My mother was an actress with the Abbey and then the Gate when she was younger, and she went on to work as in the Abbey repertory, around the country. And so we have all these wonderful photos of, my mother acting as well. And then music was a big part, as I said, from the fact that there was, on both sides of the family, musicians. My great aunt Anne played the harp, and in fact was in the Conservatory of Music in Paris. So we have a great lineage there, yeah.
So you had no choice, really, only to buckle up and follow in the artistic footsteps of all that kind of talent around you.
Talk about being in my blood, yeah.
That's right. And where did you begin, really? I mean, I was reading a bit about the Foxtrot folk club. Now, how important was that to people like you?
It was
your formative years, yeah.
Yeah, it was hugely important. One of the reasons is because it was at a time when, we're talking about pre-internet, and it was Foxtrot was a suburb at the time that was quite new, and the parish priest wanted to give young people something to do on a Sunday night instead of just, hanging around in the streets sort of thing.
Right.
And fair enough. He actually asked, again, my sister, who used to bring home the albums, she was part of a co-op that he helped to, he facilitated, shall we say, and they were asked to do something with the community centre every second Sunday during term time. And so they formed this music club, which began to mushroom because they invited people who were, at the time, well known locally, are now household names, such as Donal Lunny, Andy Irvine, the Chieftains were just on the cusp of international stardom then.
Right.
And of course, jazz, from the point of view of jazz, was Louis Stewart,
Oh,
and great jazz guitarist who so sadly has passed away. We all miss him very much. And he was a huge influence on jazz in Dublin. So we had there were a lot of people who were, as I said, well known locally, and then not so well known, but were asked along because they were part of the community. So we had a local teenager, 16 years of age. I was about, I was a few years younger, but because it was a cup of tea, in the community center, and I was able to get there. I was able to go there every second Sunday and enjoy it and absorb the atmosphere. And it's hard to imagine now, because there's so much available, music online. It's hard to imagine, well, what was it like to have these array of crossing over all the different aspects we had world music before it was even coined,
exactly.
We had a young guy, 16-year-old, playing fantastic Spanish classical music on his guitar. And then we had Brian Fry. Some people might remember Brian Fry, who was this wonderful blues singer. He was from England and he lived in Ireland. So he became an honorary Irishman. And so we had a fabulous mixture of the arts. So it was called the Foxtrot Folk Club. Some people also might remember Lar Cassidy, who became a very important name in the Arts Council years later. And he was the one who coined the term, the Foxtrot Folk Club, as in the folk, it belongs to the people. And
right.
So it was very much from that premise, that music and the arts. We had some people, there was the Abbey Youth, at that time they were youth theatre, very much at the beginning, and they would come and do readings. And we had Neil Tobin, the actor, it was just poetry, the arts, music and theatre, and as I said, all sorts of music. So jazz was a huge part of it too. And when Louis Stewart and the Chieftains were on the same lineup, they jammed together at the end of the night.
Go ahead.
That was a huge moment for me personally. And I know that many other people who were there that night remember it as a really important night, and one that still is in the folklore of our local, history.
I suppose what you were saying there, Melanie, is that it was truly the first art centre without it being giving its name art centre, because it's all art form was allowed there inside the door of the place, which is fantastic. Every parish or every place should have one of those anyway. Now yourself, when did you perform for the first time?
Oh my goodness, I performed way back. I was pretty young. The school I went to had, the school shows at the end of the term, and I was delighted to join in with all of those. So I think I must have been about 6 or 7 or something like that. But but in my teens was when I began to do more, because I started singing for the Feshkill competitions.
Oh yeah.
And so that was actually very important also, around the same time actually as the Foxtrot Folk Club. For me, that's at least how I remember, is that they both converged in my life. And so I went in for the competitions in Feshkill for singing. And I went in actually with a friend from school, and we're still in touch, which is great. And she was a lovely singer, and her mother was a Feshkill winner in her day of the Leader Cup, the Lieder. So she was, many times she won the Leader Cup when she was younger. So she passed on to us. She used to coach us for the Feshkill competitions. She was also a native Irish speaker. So she taught me how to sing in Irish, even though I wasn't, Irish was not terrifically well, at least at the time. It wasn't huge in my school. So I wasn't a speaker, but I loved learning how to sing in Irish, especially from somebody like Deirdre's mum, who her name is Mrs. O'Grady Walsh, and I'm forever indebted to her, because she really taught us how to sing in just the two of us. So we actually won a few competitions because of that. We were very well coached, and I've really absorbed that, and how to sing, but not only to sing in English, but to sing in Irish. So I really got to know the melodies, but not only the melodies, the rhythm of the language. And as I say, from a native speaker. So it was a great blessing. I've been very lucky in many ways of having great mentors. She was one of them.
And an example, of course, I mean, you mentioned O'Grady Walsh. Would Eileen O'Grady be related to them?
Possibly. I actually don't know, but I will find that out.
It's just the name stuck in my head there, yeah.
And the reason why I'm saying that was important was, of course, because if we go back to the Foxtrot Folk Club and the night of where the Chieftains and Louis Stewart jammed together, it was just, this was like not usually done. And now we take it a bit more for granted, a fusion. But then it was so exciting. And we just all hit the roof. It was amazing. And that, to me, started a seed that I would like to one day put together the music that I love, jazz and Irish. And so while going in for the Feshkill competitions and learning how to sing in Irish, that was important for me later on when I, after doing jazz for a few years professionally, then I'd started to do my own material and cross over and compose music to Gaelic poems, for example. And
I was reading that Celtic jazz that's how you describe it, and obviously the name says what it says in the 10 anyway. And getting back to Louis Stewart there, I had no idea. I always admired Louis Stewart, of course, obviously, but until I went to London a few times, and the reverence and esteem that man was held in was stunning. Not surprising, but stunning. Yes. As opposed to in our own country, especially have to go abroad. Although it is a small community in Ireland, the jazz community anyway, and still is. But nevertheless, he was, I don't know, a rock star in jazz terms abroad, so to speak.
Absolutely. You're totally right about that. And,
now,
c'est une chanson qui nous rassemble, toi qui m'aimais, je t'aimais. Nous vivions tous les deux ensemble, toi qui m'aimais et je t'aimais. Mais la vie sépare ceux qui s'aiment tout doucement, sans faire de bruit. Et la mer efface sur le sable des amants désunis. The autumn leaves drift by my window. Those autumn leaves of red and gold. I see your lips, those those summer kisses, those sunburned hands I used to hold. Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter song. But I miss you most of all, my darling, when autumn leaves start to fall. Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter song. But I miss you most of all, my darling, when autumn leaves start to fall. When autumn leaves start to fall. When autumn leaves start to start to that shine so bright, the mystery of their fading light that shines upon our caravan. Sleep upon my shoulder as we creep across the sand, so I may keep this mystery of our caravan. So exciting, this is so inviting, resting in my arms as I thrill to the magic charm of you beside me here beneath the blue. My dream of love is coming true within our desert caravan. Night and stars above that shine so bright, the mystery of the fading light that shines upon our caravan. Sleep upon my shoulder as we creep across the sand, so I may keep this mystery of our caravan. So inviting, this is so exciting, resting in my arms as I the magic charm of you beside me here beneath the blue. My dream of love is coming true within our desert caravan. Caravan.
He used to play in Slattery's in Dublin. I used to go and.
Yeah. But did anybody? I suppose everybody and anybody sang in Slattery's.
Yes, but I think I only went as a teenager. I was allowed in with my orange juice, you know, because they were so excited to see somebody younger, you know. And again, you're right. Slattery's was one of the main venues for music at that time. But in any case, very hugely important. Louis was hugely important for his inspiration to us.
So you're finished your school, and you're hanging around Foxtrot and wondering what to do. What did you do?
So I went to UCD and I studied arts and got my degree. And I had a good time because I joined in with the Dramsoc and sang in musicals. And in fact, with again, a name who's well known now is Michael Scott, the director. And he's a very well-known Irish and Dublin-based theatre director.
Yeah.
And he was around the same time as myself in UCD, and we were in Dramsoc together. So my first big show there was Michael Scott's direction of Tommy the Rock Opera. So that was a huge event and show at the time.
It was.
Again, it was, you know, one of the first rock operas in UCD at the time, and I had the role of that Anne Margaret played.
So I suppose, I mean, of course, you did the sensible thing and got your degree as mum and dad would expect. But I suppose your exposure that gave you confidence in obviously being on the stage in UCD and all your peers looking up at you. I suppose that was good grounding for you.
It was really good grounding, and at the same time, I didn't stop going to my uncle's theatre academy for the first couple of years of my degree. I still was acting and doing theatre with the academy. So I had, you know, the arts was huge, and I really enjoyed that, and it was wonderful. It was great socially as well, but it helped me tread the boards. Yeah. And then with UCDs, there were other musicals that I joined in, and so it was a great coming together of the two, theatre and music, if you like. So it gave me a great grounding, and which now I'm really, you know, just started growing. And then I had a little bit of a few years where I actually went into nursing.
Go here. I didn't. That's a secret now. I couldn't find anything online about that.
So I'm letting it out now to you, Pat.
All right, it's okay. I didn't. So you were nursing for a few years. That's in Dublin?
No, in Edinburgh. So
lovely.
What happened was that there was this very special course there for people who had already had a degree, and it was called a shortened course for graduates. So really, it was you didn't shorten your time on the wards; you just shortened your time for studying, because we left a lot up to you. And it was, you know, slightly unusual that I did that, but because in the family, again, you know, we're arts is so much part of us. But it was really to do with, for me, I felt that I wanted to have something a little bit more grounded, as a, you know, just in case kind of thing. And I actually thought, as I went through nursing, I did general nursing. I staffed an accident emergency, actually, which is a great training for anything in life. Oh my
God, it is.
And then I went on to do psychiatric nursing for a year training. And then it was after that I, you know, knew I needed to go back to the arts. And in fact, I couldn't help but pick up the guitar and sing for the patients in the ward and the psychiatry, and they were, they were very happy about that. So I thought I might do music therapy for a while. And in fact, I did a little bit of that with an Edinburgh-based company called Arts, I think it was called Artlink.
And how did that go down?
Great, marvelous. I mean, it's just, the arts are so important for one's well-being and mental well-being.
You're right,
no
Mel.
who you are.
As you mentioned, music. I have a brother, and they have a little group, and they go out to the local nursing homes once a week singing. It's all singing for the patients, and
Yep.
I had no idea he did that, but until recently, until my own mum got into the home. But it's fantastic. I mean, I was out at one of them, and the effect it has. A lot of these dementia patients. The effect it had was, I was blown away.
Yes. No, it really has a huge influence on one's well-being and whoever you are. But as you rightly say, it actually is proved to be, one of the last parts of, if somebody has memory loss, music is the last thing to go.
It is.
And including lyrics. That's very interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My mum doesn't know anybody now. But if those songs that she sang, like Pat of My Cradle Days and those things, if that came on, or if you started singing it, she'll be singing the words.
Yeah.
Normally.
Yeah.
But nothing else. Yeah. But anyway.
It's hugely important. And right now at this point where we are, having had the COVID outbreak has affected us all. So I hope and wish that we return to normal as soon as possible, because the arts are hugely important for our community. But in any case, firsthand, I really got a lot out of nursing and was very glad I did it, because it gave me a grounding of experience with people, of course, in accident emergency as well.
Yeah.
So, but as I say, I spent a little time with Artlink, and then and that was all in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And I made a great community there, and I started singing with, you're going to laugh at this, I started singing with doctors who were psychiatrists, who were great jazz.
Yeah.
And so they needed a singer in their band. So we used to rehearse every week. And first of all, it was just a way of, our own therapy, if you like. And then we were asked to do events and play for gigs,
Oh.
And we became quite popular. The band was just called The Doctors, I suppose.
Very original, yeah, but it didn't matter. The music was the thing.
And as I say, it became very popular. And then, of course, for me, I was going to be going back anyway. I knew in my heart I was going to go back to the arts. And this was a very nice way of doing that, because it got me singing the songbook of the American songbook that I had actually already done over years at home or listened to with Jazz in Dublin, thanks to Louis and the Foxtrot Folk Club. And then just my own absorbing, if you like. So I had a lot already in the back of my mind. So it's interesting how that came out more when I joined the Doctors band. And then I decided I would, it was time to leave the part of the nursing, if you like, or the
discard the uniform and off again.
And then start to, and it happened quite naturally, because then I was asked to join other groups, and I started singing professionally in Edinburgh. And there was a fantastic community of jazz artists there, jazz musicians. And there was a very interesting rivalry going, friendly rivalry, because there were families of jazz musicians.
All right.
Who, the Rays and the Bancrofts, and then just there was a great structure. As it happened, I was very lucky to be there at a time when there was the Scottish Arts Council had actually worked with a touring manager and assembly director, they were called. So they used to do a lot of events, and again, it just snowballed a bit, for over a few years. So I got great concerts, and I got great support for doing the concerts and doing tours.
And you were based in Scotland at this stage?
Yes, based in Edinburgh. And I also, and I must mention, a guitarist that he asked me to join his small 10-piece band.
Yeah.
Small big band, if you like. But also we had a duo, and his name was Francis Cowan. And he sadly passed away, and he's very missed by the Scottish community. And indeed, he was international. He used to play in Ronnie Scott's. He used to play the double bass in Ronnie Scott's, actually.
Oh, beautiful. I love that instrument. I love it.
Oh, he was a wonderful musician. He played various instruments, but in any case, jazz is what his passion. And so he played guitar with me, and we actually became quite well known around Scotland. And in fact, we did the Festival Hall in London during that time. And my very first time in Dublin doing the National Concert Hall was with Francis Cowan.
And how was that experience, the Festival Hall in London?
Oh, that was extraordinary. That was amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was quite daunting. But
oh, absolutely. I'd say so. I'd say so. Yeah, like that.
It was wonderful. It was well received too. So.
And did you come back to Dublin then again, or did you stay abroad?
Yeah. No, I came back to Dublin. I had a series of changes in my life, so I came back to Dublin in the late 90s, and then I'd already recorded my first album, and that...
Which one was that?
Ilan Driachta, Enchanted Island.
Oh yeah, Ilan Driachta. Oh, that was the first album you did. And who, just for our listeners and viewers, all four of them, I hope, and I'm only joking, but Ilan Driachta, how did that come about? Or was it your idea? Was it something that was in your head for a while, or how did it come about? And who played on the album?
Yes, it was a series of ideas I had that I wanted to continue developing, and I was lucky enough to team up with a studio in Edinburgh, just outside Edinburgh, and I teamed up with the trio I had at the time, and we started writing together, particularly with the piano player David Milligan, and he really understood what I was trying to do, and I also started putting melodies to Gaelic poems. So that was after I had done a lot of gigs and concerts and years of doing the American Songbook. But I thought, again, so this is the moment when I went back to my own roots, or of Irish roots, as the Irish culture. So I love poetry. And again, that is very influenced by the time in the Foxtrot Folk Club too. And my mother, I must say, I forgot to mention that this is very important. She was an actress, as I mentioned, but she was also on the radio on RTE with a show in the early 70s. And it was called A Woman's Word. So she actually was one of the first 3 women hosts at the time on RTE Radio 1. Bonnie O'Reilly and Bonnie O'Reilly. Bonnie. Yeah. So her the signature tune was "A Walk in the Black Forest," and everybody always remembers that. Anyway,
that's a beautiful piece of music, actually. Yeah.
It is, and was very catchy. So she used to read poetry as well. She became, for that time, she was a celebrity on the RTE, and she used to read poetry as well. So she gave me that, as well as the family,
right.
If you like. So poetry, but Irish poetry, I was particularly interested in because of the rhythm and the musicality of the language. So I started writing music to Irish Gaelic poetry of the 19th century, and even before that. And then I came upon Nuala Ní Dhomhnall's poetry, which I thought was wonderful Gaelic poet.
Yeah.
And she gave me permission to, she accepted the poem I'd already started putting music to, which was called Fesh, which is from her book, The Astrakhan Cloak. And it's a wonderful celebration of love, if you like. And it's amazing poetry. And so I put music to that, and she accepted that, and she was really happy about working with me on a few other songs. And in fact, Ilan Driachta, the title of the album, is from her poem, which originally her poem is called High Brassel.
The High Brassel was translated.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I remember being in. Yeah, I remember it now in the back of my head. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And so, of course, it's the Welsh or the Old Welsh name for the island off the west coast of Ireland, which has disappeared, but it is said to have existed. But it's beautiful, her poetry. And so, Ilan Driachta,
Have you? Would you have a bit of it there? Would you have a bit of it in your head?
Well, I certainly send you that. It's
Just a verse.
Oh my goodness, I'll have to drink my cup of tea here.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Think about. No, we can say. But
Eclair carum, suniha, egrolium chat gaji, dilhandriata. Fumyanda gumma hernyak, har unmogna. Is more I've shot the Lord, August is neighbor. Tarhuam, so that's the first verse.
And of our fault, beautiful.
The melody still stays there, but
Yes.
What we had then was Dave Milligan's string arrangements, and that actually made it beautiful in its dynamics, so that you'll hear at the beginning, it starts with an atmosphere, if you like, of
those albums, Melanie, like Ilan Driacht and Pure Counter, and can they still be bought on those platforms, those wretched platforms? Have them on like.
Actually, you can go to my website.
Your website?
It just so happens my website is MelanieO'Reilly.com, and if you go to my website and you go and you hit the button at the top that says albums, you can see all the albums there.
Excellent.
And you can hit on the particular albums, Ilan Driachta, Enchanted Island, Ceol Ceantar, or District Music. And there, you'll see when you hit on that, you can see where to buy it. There's another page that's linked, which is the Bandcamp. These days, everybody sells their music on Bandcamp, which is linked.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And while we're speaking about albums, I can't, before I forget it, House of the Dolphins. I was listening to a few tracks off that.
Yes, that's my second album.
Do you like that album yourself?
Yes, I was very happy with that. And
did it win some award?
It was nominated for two.
Nominated, sorry.
Yeah, for Irish Music Magazine Awards. And at that time, there was actually very few other smaller companies who were nominated. So we were very, very chuffed about that. Nominated for best album, actually, and nominated for best female artist.
Well, you must have been chuffed.
I was absolutely over the moon. Yeah, I was over the moon.
What year was that? What year was that?
Well, it's sold in, at that time, of course, it's only in the last few years everything has gone much more digital. But in the record stores around Dublin, it sold pretty well, and it was played. Both Ilan Driachta and House of the Dolphins were played a lot on radio. So there were various, and House of the Dolphins is the title track is from a song that I wrote as a tribute to my father, because he gave me a postcard. It was actually the last, little did I know, but he got ill 3 weeks later. But I was going back to Scotland from the Cork festival, and he was driving me to the airport, and he had just been in Greece with an old pal of his himself. They'd had a week in Greece, and he gave me this beautiful postcard, which was the old mosaic of the boy on the back of the House of the Dolphins, and it's called the House of the Dolphins. Is actually the remains of it, this ruins, and so it just started inspiring me to write the song. In any case, and then I it's a tribute to my father. So it's a very joyful celebration of my father, really.
Yeah, I like that. The House of Dolphins. Now, I know we're jumping around. You're listening to Room 52 here on lirmedia.tv, and info@lirmedia.tv is our email. And we're with the wonderful Melanie O'Reilly, international singing star, broadcaster, artist extraordinaire. Now, Melanie, you played. Now, when did you go to America?
Yes, so I was, after Scotland, I was back in Ireland for a few years, about 5 or 6 years. And then and that's when I, as you rightly say, I did House of the Dolphins after Ilondriacha. And then I went, what happened was I was invited at a Celtic Studies conference that I was invited to sing at in America, in California, at UC Berkeley, and made contacts there with the UC Berkeley's Celtic Studies department. Invited me as a visiting scholar, musician in residence for, 3 years. And that
what year was that? Can you remember?
That was 2003. No, it was really 2004. It was late 2003 that the paperwork was done, and so really it kicked in from 2004.
Yeah.
And I was there. It was supposed to be just 3 years, and then it went into 5 years as a visiting scholar, musician in residence, and I became they were very interested in what my research were, because I love research. So particularly for songs.
Well, you're like my friend here, Mary, researches her thing. She loves that.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think it's very illuminating. Our own history is very illuminating.
Yeah.
And when I was in America, of course, in California, it was very interesting to look at the women immigrants, the Irish immigrants from the 19th century, particularly women. I had been asked already by the Irish Arts Council to develop an idea I had of looking at the women who left from Ireland to America. But I focused in on 3 women who left from Cove in County Cork.
Most of them did anyway, yeah.
And of course, being that one of the main spots. And the arts centre there, the Serious Arts Centre, had actually asked me, after hearing me sing there, they asked me to work with them on collaborating, if you like now, to develop songs based on the history of women who left, because there's not a lot about women who left in the 19th century.
No.
So they were very interested in that, and I'd already started writing on women immigrants of the 19th century. So they asked me to develop that. And so it was great. I got a bit of support. And out of that, then the visiting scholar, musician in residence, while I was in California, I was able to do more research from the American side. So I developed the album called Women Who Left. And that will very shortly be having, now I'm able to catch up on a few things. That will very shortly be available on Bandcamp to my website. Melanie O'Reilly.
Women Who Left, what is that now? Is that a collection of stories or songs? Or
stories that I've made into songs of 3 women.
And who were those 3 women, Melanie? Do you remember who were those 3 women?
Yeah. One was Annie Moore.
Oh,
Annie, who of course is famous because she left from Cove in 1892 and just arrived on the first. She arrived actually on the first day of 1892 when Ellis Island officially opened. So she's seen as the first official immigrant to arrive in New York, and because she got a gold coin for it, because she was the first one to arrive. And there were lots of, councillors and local hoi polloi there. So she was it was very exciting, and it's gone down in history. And her descendants, in fact, a few years ago in New York had a huge memorial. And she had 8 children, so she had a lot of descendants. And so she is formally seen. Of course, we know that there were a lot of immigrants before that, but because Ellis Island officially opened as an immigrant centre, she was the first one to disembark. And
there was I remember now that you mentioned her name, there was a program, many programs about her, right, anymore. And who were the other 2?
So I wrote a song about her, and a couple of songs, in fact, and then the others was Nellie Cashman.
Cashman?
Nellie Cashman,
That's
also
a Cork name.
she was from Belvelly, just near up the road from Cove, and she again a fascinating lady. She went in the in fact, just at the beginning of the Great Famine of Ireland. So she and her mother and her sister, her father had already passed away, and she was very young. She was only 5, I think, if my memory serves me right. And she went to America with her mother and sister, and she very quickly learned how to be a survivor, and in her teens became a bellhop, elevator bellhop, as they called,
My God.
Yeah, as a woman as well, very interesting, in Washington. And she heard a lot of the stories of the West and the gold mining as she was letting people on the elevator. And so that's the fascinating stories. She was inspired to go west, and she became a gold miner. And a very successful gold miner.
Very successful, you said, yeah.
Yeah, and she went to, she started opening up, she was a very good businesswoman. She opened up also these guest houses.
Boarding houses, yeah.
So she earned a lot of money, first of all, in doing that. And they kept going. That kind of fed her when she had her ups and downs. Sometimes she did well in her gold mining and sometimes not. But she kept she was a very good entrepreneur. She kept the guest house going. So that was in Arizona, and she is still remembered in Arizona. I think there's an Nellie Cashman Day, actually, and she's remembered on one of the stamps and everything. So
I have relatives Cashman. My God.
Oh.
And I'm from that neck of the woods originally, all my family. But anyway, God, I must look it up now.
You have to look that. That's another conversation.
It is. And Nellie Cashman, yeah, Nellie Cashman. Before I shuffle off, Nellie Cashman, who was the third person, who was the third lady?
You've just grabbed me now. Was a woman who went to Peterborough. She actually was part of the settlers, and that was even earlier in the 19th century.
Yeah.
In the 1860s, and she was one of the early settlers that was organized by Lord Peterborough, if you like, or one of the at the time, of course, somebody who was trying to give, I suppose, give a chance to some of the poor Irish communities, and they were invited to go over and settle in Canada. So it was North America, but it was Canada.
Yeah.
So I wrote songs about really it was from after researching about these wonderful, interesting people. I was inspired to write songs about their journeys. So that's what Women Who Left. That's the album.
Well, fantastic. I have a lot of catching up to do now when we're finished all of this, and I'll be busy. We have a small budget anyway to buy stuff, but this is Room 52 on LearMedia.tv, and my guest this morning, fantastic, Melanie O'Reilly. Now you were.
Cool sé an ceol is ceanta náún cuoin ní hiad na fa glán I ceanta náún cuoin a gawan trí blas as fúman an na múan an ceol at leisian an strand siúr ceol ceantar na tleisian leach de leabhar ceol na chula sa riamh Tás go dhearach damas svi smever haster ekam ri country glass yes fumanuan and kjolet lashan and stranger kjol kjenter Someone, you're the cluster for someone, you're the cluster for someone. Few in a tregan kanut, you're the cluster for someone, you're the cluster for someone, you're the cluster for someone. Few in a tregan.
Of course, we have to preface, Melanie, with your connection with America, that despite all the turbulence that's going on there at the moment, without mentioning it at all, is getting wide coverage elsewhere. It's still a fantastic country. There's no doubt about it. And they're fantastic people. They're so hospitable and welcoming. I don't know, I was in the taxi business for a while, way back, and I used to love picking up American tourists at the airport. Shannon Airport, that's where I operate out of. And I could tell you, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And you spent a lot of time in California.
I did. I ended up, as I said, I was supposed to.
Was Ronald Reagan knocking you around there at all when you were there?
No, that wasn't my time, but although my uncle and aunt were Ron and Nancy Fagan, so there was.
And you wound up in California. I don't know.
They lived in Los Angeles. My aunt is still there. My uncle's passed away, sadly, but my aunt is still there. And so she said it was she used to get a lot of jokes with Ron and Nancy Fagan in Los Angeles. But in any case, yes, the Americans, I must say, they were incredibly hospitable. I've made wonderful friends there. And of course, as a musician, the fact that I was working with American jazz musicians was a fabulous experience for me because, you know, America gave jazz to the world. I mean, jazz actually originated in America. Yeah. So now it's all over the world. It's, as I say, how America's given this music to the world and shared it, and it's developed now to be part of world music as well. And so it was very special for me to be able to work with American jazz musicians. And the Bay Area, which is where I was based, in Berkeley, of course, which is the across the bay from San Francisco. So it was a wonderful place to be based, because not only did I, for the first few years, I had UC Berkeley, and I had access to all the extraordinary talks that were going on there, but there was also the Berkeley, which is now called the Jazz Conservatory, the California Jazz Conservatory of
Yes.
Music, based in Berkeley. And the musicians that I worked with were all around, were from various parts of the States, but because the Bay Area is so beautiful, they chose to live there. And so it has a fabulous community of musicians there that I was able to take advantage of. I had wonderful opportunities to sing both the jazz repertoire of the songbook, the American songbook, but also to explore more of my Celtic jazz. And I was interested in the fact that the jazz musicians, the American jazz musicians, were really interested in that, because they understood that I was coming from my own culture, and yet musically I was the discipline of jazz. So they understood that very, very well. So I worked with an amazing array of musicians. And in fact, particularly in the last few years, with a piano player. In fact, there were two piano players I'll mention. One is John R. Burr, and he actually has an Irish passport. He's got Irish grandparents. And I started writing with him. And then he got particularly busy at a time when he was just, he was just so talented, but also, family, and he needed to travel less, whatever. So he said, he recommended another piano player, and he said, I'm a little nervous about giving you this name, because I know that you might end up working with him lots. So that's what happened, actually. His name is Frank Martin, and he's also incredibly well known in California, and particularly California. He's a piano player and composer and arranger, and he does arrangements for Sting every year for Sting's Carnegie Hall concert.
That's Frank Martin.
And his name is Frank Martin. And so the last few years I've been co-writing with Frank, and a few of those tracks are on Kjol Kjanter. So
I must look that up now. I have a lot of catching up to do on your music. Yeah. I'll tell you that much, Melanie. So you're in California now, of course, and rubbing shoulders with the great and good. And yes. how did that RT connection come in by Jazz on the Bay?
Well, actually, I had done a little bit of radio before I left to go to the States. I subbed for a couple of people, and then I had an idea of doing a jazz program, and it developed more when I was in California. So I wrote back to the producer I had worked with and the head of radio at the time, and they liked the idea. So the idea being, which came to me when I went to a jazz conference, a jazz education conference. Right. Education is a big part of what I do. So there's a jazz education conference in Los Angeles. It was held every year alternately New York and Los Angeles. So at that conference, there was a panel discussion by jazz singers such as John Hendricks of Robert Hendricks and Ross, wonderful. Kitty Margolis, who is also very well known, is still a very well known singer, great singer in the Bay Area, and various Sheila Jordan.
Oh yeah, I remember Sheila Jordan. Yeah.
Sheila Jordan, she's become an icon now. Beautiful lady, and so she was on the panel, and there were a few others. So it was like very interesting hearing their stories and then the discussion about jazz singing at the time, and where will it go and how will it further develop. But what I was fascinated by was that each person, I had already known Sheila Jordan actually when she had given me some master classes some years back, but the stories of each person on the panel, to me, it struck me that, my goodness, I'd love to know more about these people. So I would like to do a program about them, and not just singers, but instrumentalists. So that's how it happened. I was inspired to feature jazz musicians and singers. And I had a unique opportunity because I was in California, and a lot of the jazz musicians would come to play in Yoshi's Jazz Club in Oakland, for example, or San Francisco, indeed. And so while they were there, I would do a little research beforehand to check when they were coming up, and find out if I and request an interview. And they all said yes. And so I got to, and then, for example, I met Marion McPartland and interviewed her. And
piano jazz herself, her long-running piano jazz program, fabulous.
Exactly. Piano jazz was her program that she had, and it was still to date the longest. Although she's passed away, they still play piano jazz, and they have someone else, I think, taking over now, but they still play piano jazz of her interviews. She, of course, was a wonderful piano player, but she also had incredible guests, and it was the longest running program, not just jazz program, the longest running music program on NPR.
Yeah.
I think it still has that,
I'm not surprised, because she had a fantastic way about her. But being a musician herself, of course, she would understand musicians, that's natural. But the first program I heard on her, I just was surfing the net, so to speak, was her interview with a very, very young Brad Meldow.
Yes.
And he was in awe of her. I knew by him he's he was only starting out at the time himself, And
yes.
Fantastic program.
Yeah, but you see, she had a great ear and eye for the younger musicians who are coming up, as well as the iconic, well-known jazz musicians. So it was while I was early on in my time in California, I heard her program and her interview with Clint Eastwood, for example.
Oh yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but Clint Eastwood, steeped in jazz, and of course his son Kyle. I saw Kyle in the Cork Jazz Festival, Kyle Eastwood. I just had about 30 seconds to say hello to him, but anyway.
Yeah, no, indeed.
Clint is still knocking around. He was 90 on Sunday.
Was he really? Oh my God.
His birthday last Sunday, he was 90, yeah.
Wow. Well, he's fantastic that he keeps going, but he also is a great jazz lover. And so I got to interview him because of
What was that? Tell us now, before I can't let you get away with that. What was that? How did you come to interview? He was the mayor of Carmel, of course, in California.
He was, absolutely. So Carmel is where he's based. He's never lost his roots. He loves California. He originally is from Oakland, very just beside Berkeley. And in fact, I know this because he told me in our conversation. But why I got to interview him was because he is a great lover of Dave Brubeck's music. And he's also, when Dave Brubeck was alive, he would, in fact, I think he still is involved with the Dave Brubeck Institute. And the Dave Brubeck Institute is part, at least when I was there, was part of the Pacific University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, which is where Dave Brubeck was brought up. And he was, around that area. So Dave Brubeck, I got to meet because he was coming over from the East Coast. At that time, he was living in the East Coast, and he came over to do a festival, a Brubeck Festival, in the Brubeck Institute, and it was the third one running or something like that. So I got to he was coming, so I got to actually interview him. Amazing.
Oh,
I tell you how I got that job. Because the publicist, his name is Patrick Giblin, and thank you, Patrick, because Patrick did wonderful things to get me, in responding to my request. But it's interesting. He says, "Now, Melanie, I have one question that Dave Brubeck wants me to ask you, and that is, who wrote Take 5?"
Paul Desmond.
Immediately I said, Paul Desmond. That's Dave Brubeck's sax player in his trio. And so immediately Patrick said, "Great, you've got the job."
Yeah, because for a long time, Well, I mean, of course, I was interested in jazz, so I knew that anyway. You know, I always looked at the tracks I played and the thing. But he did some fantastic albums himself. That's Paul Desmond.
Yes,
You know?
indeed.
He died. He died a young man.
He did indeed. He did. But it was just very good that, you know, the fact that it's just interesting to hear that Dave Brubeck gets a lot, you know, he used to get a lot of journalists who would, you know, not really know their jazz, and he was fed up, you know, he just didn't want to have, he had very little time to waste, so he was certainly not going to.
No, I don't blame him for that. That's spot on, you know. Well, that happened to me once because I was very new, and we were involved in community radio, not to bore you to death. And there was a piano player, a guest piano player, with a local group playing. And I said to one of the lads organizer, "Could you give me just a quick bio of him, you know? So yes. I'd have a 5-minute interview for the community radio station." I went up to interview him. He was very gracious and very nice, you know. He was very busy, only was 4 days in Ireland. But anyway, I got the wrong bio from the person on another musician, if you follow my drift.
Oh.
So the very first question I asked him, he was looking at me, really looking at me, and he said to me, I think you got the wrong bloke, you know. He was from America. Stopped anyway, and he saw the funny side of it, really, you know.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
He gave me an interview after the gig. I said, I was no good. I said, I nearly died, you know. Nearly died.
Well, it's a learning curve, but I must say, Dave Brubeck, when I got to meet him, it was a huge influence on me. Meeting him and spending time with him. Now he was a very busy man. He gave the interview in the auditorium of the concert hall that he was about to, lead his band that night, and I was just treated so well and respected, and he gave me an interview which was about 14 minutes long. I remember that because I remember that's just in my consciousness now.
Yeah.
In that 40 minutes he gave a fantastic interview, so of course we'll get to hear that. I'll have that. I still have those in my own archive. So
that's fabulous.
Yes, and also it was actually when Dave Brubeck passed away, the Brubeck Institute came to me and said, could we rebroadcast your interview? Because I called it Dave Brubeck, His Music and Legacy, because I got to interview lots of people that day who were around for the festival, who were Dave Brubeck fans, and including, other musicians and producers. So, and the Institute itself, and to know all about that. But through that, I got to, Clint Eastwood was the chair of the honorary board of the Institute to promote the Brubeck's music. And he had a particular event that was 3 days later. And I asked to meet him then in Carmel.
So you got to interview Clint. How long did that last with Clint? What was he like? What kind of a chap is he?
He was extremely courteous and very respectful, and he, of course, he has some Irish blood, so he was very happy to be, be interviewed by an Irish person from RTE at the time. And it was also, for him, I think it gave a little bit of a break, and it was CNN and me. That was the 2 interviews he gave. So
fantastic. You have all those just before we finish.
I do. That's part of the Brubeck, Dave Brubeck is musical.
You own those programs, Melanie, those Jazz on the Bay programs.
Well, RT gave me a license to broadcast them, as long as I, have a that I say that it was originally broadcast on RTE.
And how many of those have you?
We talk about that after, but
yeah, that's all right. Yeah, and moving swiftly along.
So what I do want to say to you though is that I have an enormous amount of wonderful experience meeting these jazz icons, such as Dave Brubeck, but also James Moody, Chick Corea, Bobby McFerrin, Kurt Elling, Dee Dee Bridgewater.
Well, Kurt Elling is
Wilson.
just...
it just goes on. And
I saw him and Ronnie Scott's Kurt Elling.
Yes.
And, oh, gee.
Yeah,
as
and
an
a
artist.
lovely and a lovely person as well.
Yeah.
And he was doing the festival down in Los Angeles, so I was able to meet him there just before he went on stage. But what was lovely was the fact that because I was a singer and in jazz, there was an immediate, they just loved, they were just talking to another jazz
Yeah.
musician
Yeah.
and of course a singer for curtailing, but also Larry Coryell. Now I must mention Larry
Yeah.
because
On Elon Driachta.
yes,
Yeah, on the album. How did you rope him into that now?
I got to interview Larry years later, but I actually met him first at the Cork Jazz Festival.
Yes.
And I had not long finished. In fact, we were still in the middle of finishing off the Élan Driachta album. And so my band from Scotland, we had done a lot, we had performed already in the Cork Jazz Festival, and it went down very well. And then I met him at the Monday afternoon. You probably were there, actually. You might have been there.
What year was that?
Oh God, I can't remember exactly what year, but it was back in the late 90s, and
Right.
it was when Larry Coryell was playing with his trio, and there was a special gathering to thank the Guinness volunteers, and so there was a sort of a gathering of just a few bands, and so Larry Coryell was the main artist for that afternoon.
Yeah.
But the wonderful Cork Jazz Festival director Jack McGarren and Deirdre Smith invited me to be part of that and to perform with my band. And so Larry saw me there and actually went to, Jack said to me afterwards, Larry would like to have a word with you. And he said, next time you're doing an album, I count me in. That's exactly what happened. And I thought,
fantastic. Just from himself like that. That's not surprising, of course, of people. But before we leave Dave Brubeck, there's a story going around, as you know. Dave Brubeck was the first jazz musician to be featured on the cover of Time magazine.
Now, do we know what year that was? I think that's correct.
Yeah. But he didn't want to do it. He didn't want his photograph on it, because he said that, and he was not upset now, I don't mean upset in the upset, but he said the first jazz musician to be on a Time magazine should not be me. It should be somebody of the stature of Duke Ellington or someone like that. He was conscious of the, of the color. He was conscious of the whole thing behind it. I heard them talking about it. But anyway, look.
No, that's a very good point, actually, Pat, because he was somebody who was he was an activist. I mean, he was for human rights. He and his wife, and I must tell you, his wife was so charming and beautiful person, and she also had a big influence on me. And they were very much a unit. She actually was his manager, but both of them were human rights activists in the sense that the music mattered, but it also mattered even more because of the fact it brought people together. And he always spoke out about any racism that he saw. He also had, if I can remember rightly, I'm not sure what year it was, but there was some particular incident when he had in his band African Americans, and they had an incident where down in the South, I think this would have been in probably the early 50s, and what happened was he pulled he was told, no, you can't, because you can't have the African Americans. And it was just terrible. And he pulled it. He said, no, I'm not going to appear there unless you have the whole band.
That's true. There's another story going. He had a black drummer one time standing in on one of his groups in a university gig, and they wanted to put him behind the curtain for the whole performance. You know what I mean? The rest of the musicians out front. He wouldn't have it. Wouldn't have it.
He wouldn't have it. No, he always spoke out, actually. He always spoke out.
Well, he reminds me much like Frank Sinatra as well, when Sammy Davis Jr. was knocking around with him, like I mean, you can imagine the horrendous treatment.
Yes.
He wasn't allowed in the front door of the hotel. The first
Yes.
time Frank Sinatra turned up the hotel, book rooms to them all, Sammy Davis walked in the door and they wanted them to go around the back and up the thing. And anyway, Frank said, you know, the clout he had, all my month-long gigs in Las Vegas will be gone if you don't do the right thing here.
Yeah,
you know?
That's right. Of course, he had a lot of clout.
But he had a lot of different friends as well, but that's Shinshke.
But Dave Brubeck, again, because I talk about that in my interview with him a little bit, and, you know, how important human rights was for him as part of, you know, and jazz has got that tradition, of course. And he became one of the jazz ambassadors. But actually, he co-wrote with his wife and an album called The Real Ambassadors, which featured Louis Armstrong. And the real ambassadors, you know, being the musicians.
Yes, of course.
So I think that's wonderful. You know.
They were, and of course, their family are still carrying on the legacy of that. But then you, of course, you got access then, obviously, because of the RT connection, because of the program connection as well. But obviously, Melanie, in your own right, you had forged those relationships with your time spent in the Bay Area, so to speak. So, yes. I mean, that was, I don't know how you recover and come back from all of that when you, you yourself, now we have to blow your trumpet as well. And I mean that in the best possible way, like, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
You're understating yourself a lot, I must say, in my opinion.
Well, thank you.
Not many people can claim to have played like in the Lincoln Center in New York.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, Wynton Marsalis is the resident chap there, isn't he? Wynton Marsalis.
Indeed. Well, it was just before he took over, but in any case, I got to play there. And I also got to, while I was in California, I got to play and represent Ireland for a jazz festival, which was called the European Jazz Festival in the Schoenberg Hall in Los Angeles. And I got to represent Ireland because, well, you know, because I was, not only because I was there, but because of the fact that I did the crossover of Celtic and jazz. And what was fantastic was to be part of that festival, that I met other Europeans who were also doing the fusion of their own country with jazz. So it's what's called an ethno-jazz movement. So that was a huge, for me, that was it was illuminating to be part of that. And that went beautifully. So I've represented Ireland, you know, in jazz. I'm very proud to have done that. And now that I've come back to Ireland, I decided it was time to come back, at least for a while, you know, and just stop for a little bit to write more and to base myself in my own place in Wexford, which is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And
the sunny southeast, yeah.
Yeah, and you bet, the sun is absolutely coming in the window. I had to close the curtain; it was a glare there.
And how is that? How was that for you now? How long are you back?
Not even 2 years yet. Yeah, it's less than 2 years.
You're still settling in.
So it's a year and a half. Yes, and I have to say, and I love Wexford. I love Wexford people. They're incredibly welcoming, and I've been, you know, welcomed by the musicians here and the arts community, and there's a great arts community.
There is, of course, the famous Wexford Opera Festival would be a fantastic event, yeah.
Which is a fantastic event, and it brings a bit of an international part to Wexford as well. But on the other hand, Wexford is very special because it still has its own culture as well. So it has that mix, if you like. And also I think the National the Opera House, the Opera Festival, over the years has meant that the standard of singing is really high here. So, you know, that's good for me because it keeps my chops up.
So you're collaborating with the Wexford Arts Centre there now?
Yes, that's right.
What do you do there?
Well, of course, I had done a couple of performances there, and was due to perform again this past April, and then coming up in this early summer again. And so obviously with the COVID lockdown and all of that, naturally it's closed, so there's no performances. And the Arts Centre came to me and said, well, we want to support artists, especially when, you were going to be performing here. And so last time I was performing there, we had a full house. It went really, really well. So I thought of something that was a bit different, and it was a way of sharing my experience and my passion for jazz, if you like. And so I teach, as I said, education is part of what I do. So I teach singing, and I teach particularly a group called Sing and Swing. So singers of the swing era.
Sing and swing. All right.
That's what I sing. I teach actually with Walton's New School of Music.
Yeah.
And now at the moment it's online because of the fact that we're all
like we are on Zoom. Yeah.
On Zoom for the moment, and but we'll think positively and looking forward to getting together again for real. But the point is that it's been popular, and from that class there were people asking me, well, what my experience, because when I talk to them, obviously my experience comes over not just in the singing but also the people I've met, because of what we've just been talking about, and all the radio show, and also the musicians I've worked with. So it was actually a couple of, all of that class were asking me, would you do a course on, a jazz appreciation course on singers during the swing era. And so I came up with that, and that's now hosted by the Wexford Arts Centre, and we're in collaboration. And that started last Thursday, and there's another one this Thursday.
I saw that, and they're the very time, of course, you should have known you'd be clashing with me that time. I should have let you know that, because
I know it's your
we do our 7 o'clock big show on every night, because it's the only time we can get together. But anyway, Anita O'Day, the tribute to Anita O'Day, what was that about?
So Anita O'Day is somebody I was influenced by very much years back. In fact, the same Francis Cowan I mentioned earlier was a great mentor for me, because he introduced me to a lot of jazz singers who might have been not as well known, or who were well known but went off the radar for a while. So she was one of them, and I was really influenced by her rhythmic singing. And I didn't really go into her story until I was doing Jazz on the Bay, and I was in Los Angeles, and I met friends who knew Anita O'Day very well. And one of them was a scriptwriter called Paul Peterson, and he was writing a script about Anita O'Day because he was great friends with her. And at that stage, she was just entering into a period where she was ill. So I wanted to interview her, but I couldn't. Yeah. She got too ill. But I kept in touch with Paul Peterson, because he said he wanted me to play Anita O'Day.
Yeah.
Or when he was, so we
doing
were
the film.
For the next few months, and I thought, that's it, Hollywood had called.
Yeah.
But what happened very sadly was, first of all, she passed away some months, the next, only a few months later. And then he passed away after that. Oh,
dear me.
Yeah, from a heart attack. So that was a few months after that. So you'll see his name there's a movie that was made about Anita not long before she passed away. And it's called The Life of a Jazz Singer. And it was a great documentary, and you'll see his name as a credit at the end.
What's the documentary, is it?
Yes, about the life of Anita O'Day.
Yeah. And
story of a jazz singer.
I used to love playing her on the little music show we had. And I used to love playing Ottilie Patterson.
Okay.
The Ottilie Patterson. There isn't much recording about her. It's very hard to find stuff by her, but I used to like her voice. She used to sing with
indeed. Yeah.
Up over in England. Anyway.
Hidden gems here. So Anita O'Day what happened then was I had already done a lot of research about her, And because I was inspired by her singing, but also by her story, because it's a fascinating story. She also was Irish American, so that was an immediate interest as well. Now, she herself didn't go to Ireland, but she did go to Ireland. She came to the Cork Festival, actually, but she didn't talk too much. She didn't. I don't think she knew too much about her own Irish roots. The point is, she was brought up, quite in a fairly poor background, so she had to leave home pretty early. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, because that, of course, is my show. And I'm hoping will be when we start opening up again.
Obviously, I mean, you have to. I mean, well, I know the lads in the Limerick Jazz Society. We'll have to have you down here anyway in Limerick. That's only.
I'd love that.
A hop up the road, like, because they have a regular Limerick Jazz Society. They have a regular residence upstairs in Dolan's.
Yes,
can hold, I think it's hold about 120 people, but it's a fabulous venue, for nice intimate gig,
I would love that, Pat. I would really love that.
We'll have to have that. We'll have to have that when we'll gain our freedom again.
You bet. And let's hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah.
The thing about Anita O'Day is that she worked with so many great bands and then musicians, and she spanned quite a long. She had a long life, even though for a few years, after she became a drug addict, she had a few years of not singing. She came back and had a second career. She got off the drugs.
Yeah.
So she had a great. So in a way, it's like going through her journey is like going through the journey of jazz at a time when it was a popular music, the popular music. So great American songbook repertoire. So it's been great for me in that project, and it also gave me a bit of I had my Celtic jazz, but I also had the Anita O'Day project, which I started doing at the Edinburgh Festival. And in fact, I first had my premiere of that in the Conservatory, the California Jazz Conservatory in Berkeley, and I noticed how interesting it was for the Americans to have an Irish jazz singer feeding back the story of somebody who was part of their tradition as well.
Yeah, who knows what's ahead. We will finish up soon, Melanie. We'll call this part one, if you don't mind. We'll call this part one, because we'll have to come back to this again. There's so many more strands we could cover, But and for yourself, just one question springs to mind of your swing and sing. Could that be translated into schools, local schools and stuff like that?
Absolutely. Very good point, Pat. Yes, absolutely. I would be happy to work with an outreach project, on that. And it would be really interesting, I think, for a project as a swing. The word swing, people understand a little more. I think that could be a specific theme, and that could be definitely worked. And
because we were discussing in another program here that there isn't enough exposure, particularly at national school level, that the arts, and generally speaking, should be incorporated into everyday curriculum, and and that, I think, could translate very easily, seamlessly into that idiom. I don't know, maybe.
Oh yeah, no, I think it could be. I think it could be very accessible. It's accessible. The swing music of the swing era is very accessible and makes people want to dance. So it would be a great idea. I would agree with you there. So I'd be happy to work with somebody on it,
So, Melanie, I don't know what, I mean, I'm absolutely delighted, and we all here at Lear Media, that you took the time out to speak to us on this program of ours on Room 52. And people ask me about Room 52, but I never tell them where I got the name. But is
that a secret?
No, it's the year I was born.
Well, why not?
Why not? Why not indeed? Room 52 on learmedia.tv, and our very special guest here, we'll call it part one with Melanie O'Reilly on Room 52. It's been an absolute blast altogether for me anyway, and hopefully for our listeners and viewers. And Melanie O'Reilly, for your time and for your graciousness and all of that. It's been fantastic, and thank you very much for showing up on our little program today.
Thank you so much, Pat, for having me, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I come to reclaim the meadowland from this even wood, my own plain blossoms and flowers with clover. My heart bursts in my body beneath my royal vest, and I say yes. Yes, I come to sing my silent song, utter in my land. Every prince I kiss will have perfection. My body gives birth to the sun and shines for you, and I say yes. I say yes. Fig trees, peaches, and pomegranates, gardens of Alameda, sand of roses in Andalus, and I pull them down. Fig trees, peaches, and pomegranates, gardens of Alameda, flowers of a mountain, and I lose my breath, and I say yes. Yes, I come, drag you down to deep waters and flood you with the crimson sea. Arrive at my core, my heart bursts in my body, and I